All right, our posts are set. We quadruple checked our layout here. Everything is spot on. So the next thing that we're going to do now is establish a level line on all 4 of our posts. And what we're gonna do with that is we're gonna reference our ledger board that we've already installed. We triple checked that our ledger board was nice and level from before. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this reference point here, come off of it, and do a level line on all 4 of our posts. Right now, I'm not really concerned about any layout. Basically, if I know that I have a line that is level on all 4 posts, then I can reference that line with all of my measurements, and I know everything will be nice and level throughout the project. So I'm just gonna go ahead and reference the top of my ledger board. Right now, that doesn't really mean anything to me, other than it's just gonna be a level line on our posts. So what I'm gonna do there is I'm gonna go ahead and set my level right on my posts. And this is actually something, especially when posts are further apart, that's better to be done with 2 people. Because when you're reading this level, you wanna be right in front of that vial. You don't wanna be taking a reading from the side here. So I'll get one of my partners here to go ahead and run the pencil for me. Gonna reference the top of my ledger board, and I'm gonna get that bubble exactly in the center of my level. And then he can do a line at the bottom of the level.
Check.
Yep. All right. So now this line here is my level line. So what I can do is I can just work all the way around my post here. AJ, can I get an extra hand here? Yeah. AJ is gonna go ahead and run this side, making sure the level is right on the line. Let's go on the top. It's easier to see. Azadi will do the top of the level this time. I'll go ahead and get it set. That looks pretty good right there. You good, AJ?
Yep.
All right, let's mark this one. All right, so let's just say we had about 6 posts on down this line. I would go ahead and get all 6 of these posts laid out. And one good check to do is I like to run the other edge of the line, or other edge of the posts. So I'll go ahead and run that side. And then if my 2 corner posts end up to be level, then I know that I've run level all the way around. It's just a real good double check. You could continue to go all the way around, but you're not gonna find your mistake until you get right back to the ledger board. So it's just a good idea to run both sides, and you'll find your mistake right away on your corner posts. So I'll go ahead and do this side real quick. This will be the bottom of the level, Azad.
You can get a shot of that, Andy.
All right.
Good?
Right there. All right. AJ, you want to hold on the top? And right there, top of the level.
Yeah, don't pull it away quite.
All right. That's good.
Got it.
All right. And now, theoretically, I should be able to go from post to post. This is a good scenario here. My level is too short. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and find a straight piece of 2x4 or 2x6. But you wanna make sure that you sight down that 2x6 to make sure that edge is very, very straight. Because what I'm gonna do is I'm basically gonna extend the arms of this level a little bit and just put this level on top of that 2x4 or 2x6, and we'll go ahead and mark our line. So I'm gonna go off camera for a second and find a 2x4. All right, we got our 2x4 here. Again, I went ahead and sighted down that 2x4. This 2x4 is perfectly straight. We're gonna go ahead and line it up with our lines that we established coming down the edge. I just want to point out real quick, AJ has a little bit of wane on this corner of the post here, so he can't get a good reading. So he's using his speed square here to extend that line out so he can be as accurate as possible. So these guys have got it lined up right with their line. So theoretically, I should be able to put this level right on here. And I am pretty darn close. I'll live with that. We are pretty much center with our level here. So we know that we are level all the way around all four corners here, and we can go ahead and start laying out some of our notches. All right, so actually before we move on, we wanted to show you one more method of getting that level line or establishing that level line on all four of our posts. Azad actually pulled out a transit level here. And this is just a little bit quicker, probably a little bit more accurate than the level. I just chose to use the level. It's a really small project. But if you had a large project where, let's say we're doing a house and it's 40 by 60, that's a lot of posts to go around and use a 6 foot level on. So a little bit more accurate way would be to use this transit level. And basically what this transit level is it's a tripod. It's the transit sitting on top, and that transit is nice and level. It's got a sight just like a shotgun. You'd be able to, or a rifle I should say. And it's got a little bit of a crosshair inside, and we'll be able to show that in a video here in a second. But basically what's gonna happen is that crosshair is at that level plane and that won't switch. So what Azad's gonna do here is he's gonna sight in that transit level there and tell AJ, who's got a story pole here, this story pole will just sit right on top of our ledger board here. This is gonna be our reference point, and Azad will tell AJ to move his pencil up and down until it matches right with those crosshairs in that transit level, and we'll make a mark. So let's go ahead and do that. AJ will move his pencil up and down here.
Yeah, keep it on him. Okay, up a little bit. Oh, there you go, AJ, right there. Give us a good line.
Right there. And you want to make a nice precise line, and what you can do is come in here with a speed square and strike that line across. All right, so let's just double check with the transit level here. Line right on.
Oh, right on.
Line's right on. So what we can do is we'll take this line, AJ will go to all of our post here, we'll start on this corner post, and now we can reference that line from our transit, moving our stick up and down here. Azad will focus in on the line.
Oh, okay. Can you bring it down, AJ? Shoot, hold on.
All right, so now that AJ's right at the right level, we can now reference the bottom of our story stick here and make a mark. And then go ahead and strike that mark off. And that is now our level line. And we can go to every single one of our posts here and do that same process, and we should have a nice level line all the way around. Okay, so for our deck here, we have our 3 rim joists going around the outside. And we're gonna have our floor joist sitting on the ledger board and our rim joist on the end here. But to take some of that load off the middle here, we're gonna be installing a girder beam going across. And for this one beam of this project, we're gonna go ahead and show you how to notch beam into one of these posts. So basically what that means here is we have this 2x8 girder beam that's gonna be going across the middle of this project here. And what I wanna do is cut out a notch in this post for that girder beam to sit right in the post. And the biggest benefit for that is now it's gonna have that notch in here to be able to have full bearing on this post and not just rely on mechanical fasteners. Mechanical fasteners is a good method. We're just showing you a different method as well. So what we're gonna do here is I'm going to reference my level line, and for this particular project, it just so happens that my level line, because we chose our base here, or our reference point to be the top of our ledger board, that level line is also gonna be the top of my deck joists. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my measurement down from my level line. Our joists are gonna sit about here, and then that's where the top of my girder beam is gonna be. So dimensional lumber, usually 2x6, that's what our deck joists are gonna be, are 5.5 inches. but it's a really good idea to go and get a couple measurements from your pile of lumber, especially with treated lumber. Every once in a while, your 2x6s or all of your treated dimensional lumber will be a little bit bigger than 5.5 or whatever that measurement's supposed to be. So it's not a good idea to just go off of basic knowledge, but go to your stack of lumber, the deck joist that you're gonna use, and go ahead and get a few different measurements. Our deck joists here, the majority of them, I've already measured them, are about 5 9/16. So they're a little bit swollen, they're a little bit more than a true 5.5 2x6. So what I can do is I can come in here and I'm gonna use that 5 9/16 measurement here and come down from my level line. Now notice while I'm using my tape measure, I'm gonna go ahead and burn an inch here. I wanna be as accurate as possible with these cuts. So I'm not gonna use the tip of my tape measure because that tip moves. So I'm gonna come down my 5.5, and or 5 9/16, because I burned that inch, I'll come down to 6 9/16. So that by the time I'm done here, I'll have that 5.5 inch or 5 9/16 inch gap. So got that measurement. I'll go ahead and strike this line. I'll double check just to make sure I burn that inch properly. All right, I'm about that 5 9/16. Right on. All right, so this is gonna be my 2x6. Now, or 2x6, not 2x4. Now my girder beam is gonna sit right underneath this 2x6 because that's what's gonna support our deck joist here. So what I'm gonna do, same thing. We have a 2x8, typically those are 7 1/4, but I'm actually gonna measure what we're using here. This one happens to be right on 7 1/4. So now from the bottom of my 2x6, I'm gonna come down that 7 1/4. Again, I'm gonna burn an inch. So I'm gonna go 8 1/4. And I'll go ahead and make my 90-degree line here. And then I know that I want to notch out the front side of this post here. So I'll go ahead and make sure I know the thickness. It should be 1.5 inches, but just double checking. We're right on 1.5 inches. And then I'll come in and mark out 1.5 inches, top and bottom. Right there. And then we can go ahead and connect those points. And this is gonna be our pocket. This is gonna be the pocket that we cut out right here. Now, it's a good idea to go ahead and put those X's in, because if you don't do that, a volunteer will come in here and they'll accidentally cut out the wrong side of this cut here. So we've laid it out on one side here. What you can do is go ahead and transfer these marks. All right, so I noticed that our lines didn't show up all too well on camera. So I went ahead and changed to a ballpoint pen. So I started transferring these lines again, making sure they show up. Go ahead and get this last one here. But now you can see our pocket here. And this is the side that's going to get cut out, this rectangle here. And again, if you want, or this side is important because you're gonna need a straight cut line. So go ahead and transfer these lines to the back. That way you have good guidelines here to cut. But I wanted to mention two things here. One, you want to be really precise with these measurements. You noticed to make these show up, I used a ballpoint pen. You want to stay away from using Sharpies or anything that's got a fat point to it, because when you cut these, you're going to want to just get right up to that line and erase that line. If you use a Sharpie, that tip could be 1/8 of an inch thick and you're not going to be all that accurate. And you want these pockets to fit nice and tight, otherwise it's going to defeat the purpose of this pocket. So be accurate with your measurements. The second thing that I wanted to mention is that we really want to reference this level line. And I kind of went over of measuring the lumber before you actually use it. And the reason for that is if I didn't go ahead and measure that, and let's just say my 2x6 was like 5 3/4 of an inch. If I just went at that 5 1/2 and set this a little bit too high, basically now as I set my deck joist in here, I might have had a crown in my deck joist. So you want to make sure that you always are referencing that level line and that you set these right at the right height. That way when you actually go into set in your deck joist, it's all on the same plane and you won't have any ridges or valleys in your floor system. All right, so I got my circular saw here, and essentially what we're going to do is I'm going to set my blade at the depth of our pocket here, which should be about 1.5 inches. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make a nice clean cut along our top guideline here. And then we'll come down here and make a nice clean cut along our bottom line. And then we'll just go make a whole bunch of relief cuts here. Basically notch this out, and then we can take a hammer and knock all of our excess pieces of wood out here. And then we'll clean it up with a chisel. So to actually set the height, I'm not gonna go over all of circular saw setup here, but I just wanted to mention how to set the height real easy. You can take a tape measure and actually measure the height of the blade, but a little bit quicker way here is to set your saw right on the wood, loosen your plate here, and then just reference your line. And I'm gonna go about 1/16, a little bit deeper here, because as you knock out that wood, it actually just works out to be a little bit better. If you go right on, your post will stick out a little bit. So I'm gonna go ahead and, it's a little bit tricky at this angle. Yeah. Set it right at about 1/16 inch deep. Right there. All right, and lock that down. And now we're ready to cut. So I should say actually off camera, I double checked to make sure that this table is nice and square with this blade here. Again, I wasn't gonna go over all of circular saw setup. We have another video for that. Go ahead and reference that if you need. I also had this tool unplugged the whole time I was near my blade. So what we can do is go ahead and plug in our circular saw and make these first two cuts. So before I actually cut into the wood here, I just want to reference that these first two cuts are going to be the most important cuts. If you get this first cut wrong, your girder beam will sit a little bit too low. And if you are sloppy on any of them, your girder beam isn't going to fit very tight. So these first two cuts are going to be the most important, and you just want to spend a little bit of extra time on it. I don't know what angle I'll be able to saw this at with the camera, but I'm just going to really focus. Make sure your kerf is on the right side of the blade so you get that cut nice and accurate. So I'm going to go ahead and make this first cut here, and then we'll do the top cut. Okay. So I went ahead and followed that line. It's always a good idea to come just right on the inside of that line because you can always fine tune it later with another cut or a chisel. And then I'll come ahead or go ahead and do this top line. All right, now that those two lines are established, you can come in here and just make a whole bunch of relief cuts, and then we'll come in and notch it out. So I'm gonna do that off camera here, but I'll show you what it looks like before we actually go out and knock out the wood. All right, so we went ahead and made all of our relief cuts. I went about every 1/4 inch or so and got all this notched out. So again, I just wanna emphasize to be really careful of your top and bottom cut, because those were the cuts that were nice and accurate. These don't have to be accurate, you just don't want to touch those lines. So now that we got all this grooved out, you can just take your hammer and just get all these notches on out of there. So because you set that depth, they should break right along that line or close to it. And it's gonna make clean out a lot easier. All right, so now that we got those out, you can just get a chisel and go ahead and flatten the rest of this real quick, and this knot should be ready to go. All right, so we went ahead and got both of our notches cut out now. We went ahead and cleaned this all up with a chisel. And off camera, we went ahead and tried to put the girder beam into the pocket, and both of our pockets were just a little bit too tight, which is actually a good thing. You want to dial this in. If it fits the first time, you're pretty lucky, but a lot of times if it fits the first time, it's going to be a little bit too big. So we went ahead and shaved off the bottom because we knew our top was right on, and we went ahead and cleaned both of these up. So we should be able to lift this girder beam right into place and get it right into our pocket, which fits nice and tight. So you don't want any movement up and down, and you want it to be nice and flush with the front of your post here. Also, you can see the benefit with our layout here. We were able to pre-cut our girder beam right now, and it fit nice and flush on both edges here. So our layout is still proven to be nice and accurate. So one last check before we actually start framing. We want to just throw a level on here just to triple check that our layout or our level line was good. And then it's a good idea to go ahead and check level coming this way. We know that our hangers are already in place. That's where our joist is going to sit, and we're sitting nice and level coming this way. So you want to do your double checks. If your pocket is off and you're in concrete, you're gonna have to dig out that concrete and reset your post. But if you set it in dirt, it's not a huge issue. You can just get a new post and reset that post. But you shouldn't have, because you did nice, careful measurements and everything worked out. So now that we have our girder beam in place, the next step is to get our rim joists out, and we're gonna go ahead and attach those as well. Okay, so after checking level, again, that's just really important to double check that your notches are at the right height. If it's not at the right height, you're gonna have to dig out your post and get a new post and place it in. It's a little bit harder if you did it in concrete. You gotta dig all that concrete out. So after we are in place here, we're gonna wanna come in and actually attach our girder beam to our posts. And what we're gonna use to do that is our timber locks. As you remember from when I was actually installing the ledger board, these are gonna be different than our ledger locks. These are just timber locks. And these ones, I got a little bit longer because most of our project, we're going to be actually attaching our rim joist to the post without notching. So you would want to get some 3-inch ones. I believe these are 4-inch. So they're gonna stick out about a 1/2 inch past my post, but ideally you would wanna get a 3-inch timber lock here. But I'm just gonna go ahead and install 2. Again, with either a ledger lock or timber lock, you're gonna wanna come down about 1.5 to 2 inches from the edge, and I'm gonna get it nice and center with our post and drive 2 of these in. All right, we'll go ahead and get the other side screwed in as well, and then we'll be ready for our rim joists. Okay, our girder beam is in place and we're ready to start thinking about our rim joists. Just want to mention real quick before we move on to that, as we're kind of going through this, I'm just the one or three of us kind of doing this deck, but normally you're going to have about 6 or 7 people doing this deck. So now you can kind of start to see all these different parts coming together. Our volunteers can be working on all these different aspects while we're setting the post, getting the girder beam in place, and getting our notches in place. You can see that we had already laid out our ledger board here. It's right where it's supposed to go. We have a corresponding rim joist on the other end. And what we had done was went ahead and actually installed our joist hangers here. We go over pretty in depth what a joist hanger is in our framing video, our floor framing video. So you can reference that there. But I just wanted to show you how to put these on before actually putting a floor joist or deck joist in. Typically, when you get these from the store, they're going to be flared out just like this. You do not want to go ahead and put those on like that, because when you put your floor joists in here, they're not going to make good contact with the floor joist and not really support it side to side. So what you do, I have actually from the deck joist that I'm going to use the cutoff from it, and you can go ahead and take that and flare it into the 2x6, and then I line my 2x6 up right where it's going to be on the wall. I'm going to flip it around here so it's flat. Get it right on the layout, and then you can come in here with your deck joist, pinch it tight, and then there's those little notches that help set it. Get those set in place, and then when we come back here and actually put our deck joist in, it's sitting right at the right location. So then we can go ahead and get our joist hanger nails in here. And finish off installing this. All right, so once this is in place, ideally this should fit right where it's supposed to go, nice and level with our ledger board, and our joist can fit right in. So you can see now we have basically our rim joists, we have our deck joists, we have our outer rim joists. These are all things that could be cut and get ready to put together as our girder beam is being notched out and cut. So those are 4 or 5 different things that volunteers could be doing. One additional thing, it doesn't take very long to cut a rim joist into place. You go over, you mark it, you cut it with the circular saw. But one thing that I like to tell summer staff is, if you kind of think about quality within a project, all of a sudden you've come up with 4 or 5 additional jobs for volunteers to keep them busy. I went ahead and cut this rim joist to length, but then what I also did is I came in here, it might be kind of hard to see in camera, but I laid out where our ledger board's gonna go. Then I got a center line, and I went ahead and pre-drilled all of the nail holes. That's gonna do 2 things. These deck nails that we use, they're a little bit thinner than most nails. They bend really easy, so when volunteers are going in to hammer them, they're gonna bend over a lot of these nails. So giving a little pre-drill hole will help drive these nails nice and straight. But then the second thing that this is gonna do is it's gonna space out these nails nice and even. It's just gonna look a lot nicer when the product is finished. So actually going through here, laying these out, taking a tape measure, making sure they're nice and evenly spaced, and then also pre-drilling just added an extra 10 minutes of work for 2 people. So being able to pre-cut all these pieces Laying out your 16 on center, putting on your joist hangers adds a lot of work and keeps a lot of people busy while you kind of have this bottleneck of notching out these posts. Just a quick tip for all of the summer staff to keep people busy. All right, so we got our side rim joist here ready to go. The ends are pre-drilled, it's cut to length and ready to be installed. I just wanted to mention real quick that a lot of times these posts might be in the ground for a day or two, and with them being beaten by the sun and drying out a little bit, a lot of times they're gonna twist on you and start to warp. So the good thing is when we laid it out, we got our string lines nice and accurate. So theoretically, you should be able to move these back if they didn't twist too much. But a lot of times if you pre-cut your lumber, the idea is you're gonna wanna bring that post back to square. If you're uncertain that if it moved or not, you can just put a level on it and you're gonna see that it's unplumbed. But it should be okay because it's in concrete or it's in the ground, and you can just bend it back. This board should bring it back into square. So we're gonna go ahead and put this board into place. And theoretically, since we set that string line at 8 foot, I cut this board at 8 foot, the end of this board should match up right with our post. If it doesn't, we can shimmy that post just a little bit, as long as it didn't twist too much, and get that right back onto layout. So we can lift that up into place here. Eventually, I'm going to have a post in this corner, but we're gonna nail in through the edge of this board into our ledger board. So I got my holes pre-drilled here. Gonna go ahead and start a nail and get this tacked into place. Okay, making sure that I'm nice and flush here. And then as we attach to our posts, we're gonna go ahead and use our ledger locks again. Get that right on our level line. We're nice and flush with the edge of our post here. And drive these home. There'll be 2 per post. And then we'll go ahead and do the center post, and we'll go ahead and install our other side rim joist as well. Okay, our 2 side rim joists are in place. We went ahead and got all 5 of our nails in place. Again, now that we have our nails in place, you can see that taking that time to pre-drill and space them gives a nice finished look to our nailing pattern here. And what we can go ahead and do now is install our end rim joist here. So one quick point, if you are installing your end rim joist that already has your pre-layout and pre-installed joist hangers here, you want to make sure that your layout is running the same direction. Make sure your board didn't accidentally get flipped end for end. Just because your joist hangers are installed on this edge of the board doesn't mean they were installed on the right side of the board. So just do that quick double check. It's a lot easier to remove the joist hangers, get new joist hangers and reinstall them than build your whole deck and realize a lot later. So make sure your layout's going in the same direction. And then what we can do is we can go ahead and lift this into place. And it's gonna be the same concept as putting this rim joist into place. We're going to do nails in the end and then go ahead and bring our 2 timber locks here in place. And again, we cut our board right to the right length. This one's gonna be 7'6" because we're overlapping our 2 rim joists. And I just wanna emphasize, cut your boards at the right length, and if your posts are just a little bit off, bring that right into where it should be, because we took that time to lay out our posts. They should be right, and you can bring them back into square if they've warped a little bit on you while they sat. So I'll go ahead and get 1 nail in here. Come over to the other side. We'll go ahead and bring this into square. I'm just gonna lean on this just a little bit. Bring it flush. Hit a knot on the end of this board. Get another nail here. Still nice and flush. Okay, so I'll go ahead and remove this nail, but we're flush on both edges here. And since I shifted that post over, I'm just gonna take a real quick check here to make sure that this post is still nice and plumb, which it looks like we're pretty darn close. So I can live with that. We'll go ahead and install our ledger locks, and we're then gonna be ready to install our deck joists. Okay, rim joists are on, and we are ready to set our deck joists. So AJ's pulled all of our deck joists out here. He'll go ahead and give me one. And what AJ's done is, if you can see, he's got all of his deck joists laying up on edge. And what he did was he went ahead and crowned all these deck boards. We go into this pretty extensively in our floor framing video, but all we're doing here is sighting down the board to see which way the crown is, and you always want to put that crown up. So we have our crown up here. We're gonna go ahead and put this into place. Drop it right into our deck joist here. And there's two things that I want to mention here. One, we want to double check that we're nice and flush still. Make sure that these joist hangers were put in properly. But two is, if you have your deck up to this point, and let's say we have maybe a 10 or 12 foot span, what you don't want to do is you don't want to come in here in the middle and measure from your ledger board out to your rim joist here and get your measurement here. If I was to do that, my measurement here would be 94 5/8 of an inch. And I know that my deck joist should theoretically be 94.5. If I would have done that, we have a pretty small span here, but I'd have a little bit of a belly in my rim joist here. You would want to take your theoretical length from your rim joist to your corner post on both sides and make sure that those match. Or if you're going off your plans, you should know what length your deck joists are, and you want to cut all of your deck joists the same size. That way, when you go in to put them in here and you nail them tight, that's going to bring this outer rim joist in nice and straight with the rest of the project here, and you won't have a bellied rim joist. So just make sure that you cut all of your deck joists to the same size, and you should have a nice straight rim joist. So what we're going to do is, on this side that we can go ahead and do some end nailing, we're going to go ahead and put the typical 3 nails in the end of the floor joist. As the volunteers were putting on our deck or our joist hangers here, they went ahead and pre-drilled our nails. And a good important thing to say about that is this is going to be the show face of our deck. So anything you do out here, you want to make sure that it's nice and neat. You don't accidentally miss your nail and put a couple divots in here. You want your nails to all look nice and neat and uniform all along this rim joist, because it's going to show. So we got those nails nice and evenly spaced there. Then what we're going to do is we're going to come and attach the deck joist to the ledger board. And since we can't really do any end nailing from here because our ledger board's there, we're just going to go ahead and finish off the joist hanger. And with these joist hangers, there's these angled sprockets. We cover this in our floor framing video. You're just gonna go ahead and put those 16 pennies in angled, follow that provided angle with the joist hanger, and install these 4 nails. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and install the 2 nails on this side, as well as finish off the joist hanger on that side. and then we'll go ahead and put the rest of these joists in. One thing I kind of want to mention, if you notice, I start in the middle here. If you have a much wider deck, a longer run of floor joists, what you can do is you can start in the middle and then work both ways out. That way you can keep 2 crews of deck joist layers, if you want to call them, going on both sides of this middle joist. Keeps more people busy, and you can install your deck joist just a little bit quicker. All right, so all of our deck joists are in place here. And the last thing that I want to do, I should say they're all nailed off as well. The last thing to make sure that these joists are nice and straight along our whole span here is you can do one of 2 things. You can either put in joist blocking, solid blocking, which is basically a 2x6 cut to the dimension in between the joist here and go all along our beam. The second thing, which is what we're going to do here, since we have a girder beam, I'm just going to go ahead and toenail our deck joist on layout right to our girder beam. So what we can do with that, my layout started from this edge here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook my tape on the edge here and go ahead and bring these joists right onto layout. And then I'm going to go ahead and mark the girder beam. So this one's about an 1/8 inch off. I'm going to bring it right onto layout. Mark that girder beam right where it's supposed to go. Come to the next one. Bring this right into layout. Mark it on the girder beam, and go ahead and do that whole set of runs there. And then I can come back in here with a 16-penny nail and toenail this right into where it's supposed to go. All right, so now as it's toenailed, I can see 16 on center lands right in the center. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that for all my deck joists here, get them right on layout and toenail them down to the girder beam. Okay, our deck system here is starting to take shape. Our deck joists are all in place, they're nailed down and they're on layout. The last thing that we're gonna do here is we're gonna go ahead and install post pockets. And these do 2 things. One, it's really gonna solidify our post here, give them some extra support, as well as give us some nailing surface or screwing surface for our deck boards. So basically what these are is it's blocking in between our joists here. Again, that's gonna help keep our joist nice and straight. But then it's also a little piece in here on the back side of this post. So when we run our deck joists, our deck boards up into this post, we're gonna have some screwing surface here for our deck joist. So we're gonna go ahead and wrap each of these posts with some some post pockets, and then we'll be ready for our deck boards. All right, so we have our framing pretty much complete here. I just wanna recap what we did. We got our rim joist in place. We got our end rim joist on and our deck joist in place and secured on layout. We went ahead and finished off our post pockets, and all 4 of our posts are nice and secure. So something that we went ahead and did off camera here, you may have noticed right off in the beginning, we didn't have any posts right up next to our building. That's just because these posts don't need to go into the ground. All of our support is coming from our ledger board. So we went ahead and installed our end post here next up to the wall. So just a little bit about these 2 posts. You can see that we've already cut them off, but it's real important to get your final post height from your set of plans, because right now, if you were to install these posts long, which in theory would be good, then you wouldn't be able to get a circular saw in here to chop this off. So we went ahead and cut these right to length. Our final post height is going to be 34.5. That's because we're gonna put some decking on here, and then also our handrail. Our railing should be, when it's finished, 36 inches. So we went ahead and chopped these off right where they're supposed to be and installed them. Basically, what I did to get that height was I went from the bottom of my rim joist here, which is 9 1/4, added that on. I accounted for my deck board thickness. And then that 36 inches, I'm also gonna have 1.5 inches of handrail on top of here and subtracted that. So you wanna take all of those into consideration. Every handrail is different. You just gotta do that math real carefully. Triple check yourself, go ahead and cut it and install it. So now that we're finished with our framing here, you can kind of see what I'm talking about. I just want to quick reference the lumber selection that we chose here. You can see that we went ahead and did 2x10s for our rim joists, but our deck joists are only 2x6, and that was for a specific reason. I wanted to minimize the amount of post I have in this project. The more posts you have, the more expensive the project's gonna be. So I tend to not space my posts any farther than 8 feet apart. And the reason why I do that is because then our handrail or our railing tends to be a little bit more shaky. So I kind of wanted to decide to just keep these ones at 7'6" since our deck is 7'6". And then I needed to have a railing here for our set of stairs. So our girder beam, technically I could have put that right in center of our deck joist here. You can see it's a little bit off center, but these 2x6 only span 8 feet, and it doesn't really matter if that girder beam is exactly in the center. It's still picking up half that load, or close to half that load. So I went ahead and placed this one right at where my stair railing is going to be, and that post now does double duty. I went ahead and left this one long, but when it comes time to cutting these posts off, I'm going to go ahead and chop this post right off at the deck height here and just deck right over it, and my handrail will then cover this whole 8-foot span. But just left it long because then we don't have to do math. You just chop it right off at the top level here and we're ready to go. But when selecting our rim joist here, I don't want to use a 2x6 because that 2x6 isn't going to be able to carry the load for this whole span. You can either talk to your construction coordinator or just reference the set of plans. But on our electronic job file, you can find our span charts that we use, and you can figure out what type of board is going to be able to carry that span. For an 8-foot span here and carrying at least half of the span of our deck here, our span charts recommended that we use a 2x10, and because I've split here, I technically didn't have to use a 2x10 on the side, but now for aesthetics, I want to wrap that whole outside with that same 2x10. So whenever I'm selecting my rim joist, I find the biggest one that I need, and then go ahead and use that for the whole project, regardless if I need it on these sides or not. But now that I know that each one of these beams can carry the load, I know I'll have a fully supported deck.